Hi, everybody. Seth Apter for StencilGirl Products. As a mixed media artist, one of the things I love to do the most is play and experiment. And I try to find new uses for older products. I am lucky enough to be able to design stencils for StencilGirl, and I spend a lot of time trying to figure out different ways to use them. I got a good one for you today. Have you ever thought about rusting with your stencils? Maybe some of you have, but if you haven't, you're in for something unique, different, and really special. Let's take a look at how it goes. All right, let's get to rusting. First off, I want to show you what you're going to need for this process. Of course, you need a stencil. I am using my Zig Zag stencil from StencilGirl Products. You're going to need something to stencil on, a background. You're going to need an embossing pad, rusting powder, a product from PaperArtsy, a craft sponge, an awl or a pin or needle. I'll explain why later. You're going to need something like vinegar, something that is acidic. You're going to need some plain paper, scratch paper, and you're going to need a pan or a tin to work in. So let's begin. I am going to start by laying a piece of paper at the base of my work surface, and that is going to catch the excess rusting powder. I'm going to then lay out the element that I'm using as my background. This is just a beautiful old vintage piece of thin paper, and I am going to lay my stencil over it. I'm going to place my stencil in the position that I want, and I'm going to start right there. Then I'm going to get my rusting powder. Let me tell you just briefly about rusting powder. Rusting powder is a bottle of finely ground iron that comes from PaperArtsy that allows you to rust anything and everything in the most simple way. We are going to need something that's going to allow the rusting powder to stick, and that is where our embossing pad comes in. So I'm going to begin by getting my sponge, and I'm going to sponge the goop, technical term, from my embossing pad through the stencil onto the paper below. I want to make note that while I am using most of the stencil, you are also more than welcome to just use bits and pieces of any stencil to create your background. I also want to make mention, you may see that I'm holding that stencil down because this goop is sticky, and every time I pounce, there's a possibility that the stencil will lift, and I'd rather not have the stencil move. Once I think I've done it enough, I'm going to decide, do I want any more? And of course, I can barely see that, but in fact, I do want more. I want to finish off this entire surface. So I am moving my stencil, and I'm going to continue to pounce. One of the beautiful things about this design, in terms of the stencil and many, many others from StencilGirl Products, is that you can move them around to enlarge them and create a design on a much bigger surface by using the stencil repeatedly. Once I have done that, I am going to remember to cap my embossing pad, and I am going to get out my rusting powder. This is so wonderfully simple. We get to the awl because I am going to need to pierce through the cap as a way to let the rusting powder come out. One of the important things is you want to have a small hole, because if you open this up, it would pour out way too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to tip the bottle, and I'm going to tap with my finger, and I'm going to take my time with this, and I am going to cover the entire surface of the paper. If I know where I've stenciled, because again, it's not always easy seeing the marks from the embossing pad, I'm going to focus my pouring on those areas. But even if I miss, you're going to see that a little bit of a shake will allow me to cover everything I need to. All right, let's see if we have enough. I'm going to just lift this up, And I'm going to give this a shake like that, and as if by magic, that design appears. Any of you who have ever used a stencil to emboss knows the magic I'm talking about. And if I see any areas that seem to have been missed, I can just go ahead and I could add more rusting powder afterwards. I am then going to open my jar and do what I would always do, again with embossing powder. I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to put it right back into the jar for my next use. And then I am going to cap it. Now, part 2. I am bringing out my pan, and I'm bringing out my vinegar. I'm going to lay this in the pan, and I am just going to spritz. I want you to notice that, because vinegar, when you use white vinegar, is clear. It looks just like water. I've labeled my jar V so that when I go the next time to use one of these spritzers for water, I don't grab the vinegar by mistake. And now I just spritz. And I coat the piece of paper or whatever object I'm using, because again, this rusting powder will work pretty much on anything, pretty thoroughly. And then we wait. Now, this rusting powder actually works quite quickly. I would say in 20 minutes, you're going to see some of these areas look rusted. The thinner you put it on, the faster the rusting. The thicker you put it on, the slower the rusting. What I'm going to do is spend the afternoon working on this project, and about every hour, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get out my bottle of vinegar, and I'm going to spritz more. I'm going to wait till tonight, maybe till tomorrow, as I watch the rusting process happen, and then I'm going to come back and show you the magic reveal. And we are back with the reveal. And what do we have? We have rust. This is actual rust, not faux rust, but real rust. And if you look closely at the surface, you see the beautiful, organic, natural feel that you get from the rust effect. I will tell you that while I have waited 24 hours to show this to you, within 20 minutes, some of this rust began to appear. Every hour for a few hours, I resprayed this with the vinegar, and that certainly added to the rusting process. But this would have rusted with just one initial spray as well. What I also want you to notice is that you get a twofer. So if I turn this upside down, I have a very different look and feel to the surface here. It's a little softer, it's a little less clear and consistent versus the original surface. So you have a choice, and who doesn't love a choice? So I am now inspired to get out additional stencils that I think would look good rusted, with some really beautiful backgrounds, more rusting powder, a little bit of vinegar, and have a play so that I can begin to create some pieces that I can use for collage and backgrounds for artwork. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.